Political polling numbers are not always accurate and can at times be considerably incorrect. Indeed, Politico reports that national surveys of the 2020 presidential contest were the least accurate in 40 years, while political polls in 2022 were historically on target. Joining us now to talk about all this is veteran pollster Mike O'Neill of O'Neill Associates. Good to see you again. Thanks for joining.
Good to be here.
How accurate are political polls?
Well, they're probably better than its worst critics say, but not as good as its most ardent adherents say. It depends on a lot of things. For example, right now, if you look at the political situation right now, it is very volatile. And numbers are liable to be all over the map because the underlying attitudes are all over the map. This presidential election was probably the most stable in American history until about 2 or 3 weeks ago, at which point in time that was no longer the case.
Okay, so with that in mind, and you mentioned how volatile things are right now. They've been volatile at times in the past. Political polling now compared to in the past, what do you see?
One of the most important things is there's a long-term deterioration in people's willingness to participate in polls. In the 70s, my dissertation research, I did a poll and got an 88% response rate. 88% of the people consented to be interviews. We've been on a long historical multi-decade downturn in those kinds of numbers of 1 or 2% a year. And for a few years, you kind of got by with that. But what that means is that today's polls are not to the same extent built on a foundation of mathematics. They're built on a foundation of, okay, well, the response rate's real low, but we can kind of jerry-rig these numbers a little bit. We're a little low in this or that demographic group, so we can wait for it. But waiting never completely fixes it. So what I would look for most things is look for the really big differences. I'll give you an example. This is something I think you can fundamentally believe. In the current election, I saw a CNN report just the other day. Joe Biden, of the Joe Biden voters, 37% were enthusiastic about their choice. They asked that question about Kamala Harris. That number was 81%. That's a knock your socks off kind of difference, and it tells you the enthusiasm for Harris is way up. I wouldn't take the 81 versus 83 or 79 to the bank, but that's a whopping difference. But when you hear that these 6 swing states, which have been stable over the last year, and I believe they are the swing states, but when you hear that somebody's up now by 1 or 2%, I would hold that at arm's length.
I want to go back to the fact that people don't like participating in polls like they once did. What's going on with that?
You know, we've all been harassed today with sales calls for a while and just the volume of interruptions. I've been getting texts, mostly asking for money from every side of every political issue. They come in, you know, every hour or two. Where you're just sick to death of the number of interruptions, and people, to a very great extent, got fed up. Whereas in the old days, would call somebody, would say we're doing a poll. That was had a kind of novelty to it.
Yeah.
And it was, in comparative terms, it was easy. You still had to work at it, call people back, whatever. But now people are just fed up to hear polls, surveys, sales calls, all of the things of life.
How are polls then, I mean, it's kind of a basic overview here. How are polls conducted? How do you know who to call? Do you go? We see online polls, which I don't know if anyone takes all that seriously. No. But as far as polling is concerned, how's it done?
Yeah, well, you start out with taking a random sample. Now, in the sweet area of polling, which is probably 1975 till around the millennium, you knew there were geographical based area codes and central offices, the next 3 digits, and you could put random digits after that, so you picked up unlisted numbers, and you could call a geographical area, and you got a random sample to the extent that you kept it. Now, that's still the gold standard, even though it's better. What you don't want, and the reason why you dist appropriately internet polls, is they tend to be volunteer samples.
Yeah.
People who say, well, I want to get on the list, maybe you'll give me some money. That is the worst of all possible things. You still want to attempt to get a random sample, but response rates have gotten so low that nobody gets a random sample now, maintains it. But it's still better. I mean, the worst of all possible worlds is volunteers.
Well, we had the worst of all possible polling seasons in 2020, apparently. I mean, no one seemed to get it right, and it was historically bad. What happened?
Well, I think the worst problem was in 2016.
Even worse?
Yeah, and I'll tell you why. Though it wasn't, we had, let me give you a historical example. The polls missed by 9% in 1980. They said Ronald Reagan would win by 1%. He won by 9. Quantitatively, that was probably the worst result in American history, but they got the results right. Now, let me tell you something. There's nothing magic about your knowing somebody is on one side or the other, or 50% has a lot of consequence for who wins, but off by 8% is bad. There's nothing if you're off, if you guess 49 and the answer is 51, you're only off by 2%, but everybody says you got it wrong.
But if you're a polling company, and let's say I'm a candidate, and you're telling me you're up by 1 and I win by 8, or I'm up by 8 and I lose by 3, you as a polling company, you're not getting my business anymore, and you might not get other people's business. I mean, this is a results-based business.
Though candidates are much more interested, or they should be, in what issues can I move? Where is my support? Where are my positions on it? On issues? How can I adjust my language? What tactical changes where's my strength, my weaknesses? Where are voters persuadable? I tell when we worked with candidates, who's ahead right now is probably the least important thing in the world, because if you're ahead, you're going to feel good, but what are you going to do about that?
Bias in polling, does it exist? And if so, how long can it last? Again, with a polling company allowed to do this before everyone goes, we can't trust them.
No reputable company that wants to stay in business is going to deliberate. Everybody wants to be right. Believe me, anybody in the business, even if they have a D or an R leaning, they would rather be right than pick one side. The only entities that are not like that are ones that are not really polling companies, but they're entities that were set up to produce numbers for that single purpose, but they're not going to be around in 2 years.
All right. Well, I know you'll be around in a couple of years, Mike O'Neill. You've been around a long time. Good to have you here. Thanks for joining us.